Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for joining, for tuning in. Hopefully, especially for the people that are joining live. I just want to first welcome you. So just give a little intro for what this is. So this is a every 2 week live show that I've been doing. I call it the Sprint Review. And basically, it's all dedicated for personal finance for tech professionals. And so my name is Mike Zung. I'm a certified financial planner and the founder of Java Wealth. And it's a fee-only wealth management and financial planning firm. And I'm based in Kansas City, but I work with people virtually all over the country. And so yeah, with what I'm doing here, a lot of times we talk about different things that are related, relevant to tech professionals, especially younger tech professionals. And a lot of times, we get pretty technical with stuff as far as getting pretty deep into the numbers and things like that. But actually, this show is going to be a little bit different, and I'm really excited about this and about the way that it's going to go. So yeah, without further ado, let me introduce the topic here. So let's see, get to the topic. And it's live, so you can see me fumbling around every once in a while. All right, so today we're going to be talking about financial life planning. We'll get way more into the detail of what financial life planning is. But with me today, I have Danika Waddell. Danika and I, we met, I guess, a little over a year ago or so in a study group where we talk about. It's a study group that's dedicated to equity compensation and different planning around that. So Danika, she is a CFP, and then she's also a registered life planner. So that's the RLP there. And so we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. And we'll be getting into it's going to be less about the numbers and more about the kind of the meaning behind and the process behind how you're making decisions on the money that you have, right? So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to switch my view here and introduce Danika.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I guess first, before we get started, how about give a little bit of an intro of your firm and who you work with, and yeah, just whatever else you feel like sharing.
So my name is Danika, as Mike said, Danika Waddell. I am the founder of Xena Financial Planning. So I am also a fee-only firm. I'm based in Seattle, Washington, but similarly work with clients all over the country. And my focus is specifically women who work in the tech sector. So a lot of the same planning issues that Mike addresses with equity compensation, IPOs, things like that. My firm is just about a year old, and I think that's enough for now.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, so yeah, I just actually, before we get into any of the big details, I have an important job to do, and that is saying the disclaimer. So first, yeah, this video, it's for only general explanations and education. It's not specific tax, legal, or investment advice. And so before doing anything based on this video, first consult with a tax, legal, or investment advisor. And if you don't have one, then reach out to me or reach out to Danika, and we can see if either we'd be a good fit or if we can find someone else that is a good fit. Because that's one thing that I think we are both very feel strongly about, that it's like if we work with a specific group that it's like we feel like we can do the best work for them. Right, and so and if it's not a good fit, then we'll do everything we can to try to find the right fit for you. Right. So I guess just getting into it, I'm gonna, like what I do with whenever I have guests on, I'm just gonna ask these open-ended questions to you and let you carry the load. So financial life planning. So it's I guess maybe I'll pass this on to you for the most part. So there's the registered life planner designation that you have, It's based on George Kinder, and a process that was developed through the Kinder Institute. So you're a registered life planner, and so how about if you could introduce the topic of either just the process that you went through, kind of what life planning is, and just the basics behind it.
That was a big question. Let me break that down.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with kind of what it is or how I think about it. So how I think about it is it really sort of flips financial planning around a little bit and has what I feel the main thrust of your work with the client becomes, sort of what is important to them, really having a very firm understanding of the values and priorities, just really going into that stuff in a pretty deep way before you talk about the numbers.
Right.
So that's kind of, counterintuitive for a lot of us because we're really used to immediately diving into, let's figure out your net worth and let's talk about your goals and let's do all these things from the actual financial perspective. And with the life planning process, you're really doing a whole bunch of work first before you get into that. So there's a lot of conversations about, again, what's important to you. And I'll talk a little bit more about what the process looks like. But I think it really focuses on that component first. And then the finances support that, right? So the finances are important, net worth and asset allocation and all those other things that we love to talk about. Those definitely come into the process, but they come in later on.
Right.
So that's kind of how I think about it. It just sort of shifts the normal engagement that we have with our clients and sort of what that format is like. It just sort of shifts it to later on in the process. And we start with all this other more qualitative conversations.
Right.
So that's how I think about it. The actual process, the training process for becoming a registered life planner, there's several different components to it. There's a 2-day training, there's a 5-day Evoke training, and then there's a mentorship, 6-month mentorship. And so you really learn the majority of the process and how to implement it in the Evoke. That's a 5-day training.
Right.
But the mentorship is where you kind of figure out how to actually do it, and you're faced with some actual case studies and things like that. So I found the whole process to be very, very valuable. But the other cool thing about it is that you actually get life planned as part of the process. So you go through the process yourself and you come up, that you're paired with another planner and then they help you develop sort of this life plan. And that part was also really, really powerful for me because I think it became just much more, I understood it in a different way when I was life planned. I kind of conceptually, like I'd heard the 3 questions and, we can talk about what the 3 questions are, but I'd sort of heard about the process and I'd heard about the 3 questions and I was like, okay, like it sounds kind of interesting. But once I went through it, it really just resonated in such a different way. It was so much more powerful than what I imagined.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. I guess first, before getting into the depths of the process and kind of what the different steps are, first just that overall feeling of talking about this stuff before you talk about the numbers. I know for myself, I found that challenging or it's tough to slow down people that come to us because they're they don't come to us just thinking like, hey, I don't know, what I want in life, and so I'm going to come to a financial planner. It's more of like, I have this pain, this event that is happening. A lot of times it's like an IPO, or I'm getting a new job, or something that has very concrete problems to it, and so it can be difficult to say like, well, before we talk about your stock compensation and everything, like tell me, and going through this very deep process, really. So I don't know if how you kind of approach that, or Yeah, just yeah, the way that you try to work around that.
Yeah. That is a very valid issue. And I do think clients sometimes are surprised when you say, okay, well, we're going to talk about your IPO, but we'll do that in 6 months after we get through all these other things. And it's, but, sometimes there's really is something that's very time sensitive. And I think, I mean, you can't just ignore, if there's something really critical happening, you can't say like, well, we haven't gone through these other three steps. We can't talk about your IPO. It's like, well, the IPO is next week. Like you gotta, you gotta do something. So, and I have had that experience for sure.
Yeah.
I think, what you can do is you can at least open some of those conversations and say, okay, in the short term, we have to make some decisions, but we at least have to have a basic understanding of what that money might be used for, or what the again, it depends on what their situation is, but I think you can sort of deal with the urgent issue and still have some of those conversations, but it will be probably abbreviated for sure in that sort of situation.
Right. Yeah. I guess it goes to, there's a podcast that I had listened to just a little bit ago with Desarte Yarnway, where they were talking about going through an IPO and how Samuel Dean was the one that said that planning for an IPO needs to happen months in advance of the actual IPO. So I guess maybe that's another vote for that, to say like, hey, before something really big is going to happen, if you know that it's going to happen, then start planning for it now, so that you do have that time, and it's not a, hey, this is happening in a week, so now I'm going to reach out to somebody to try to crunch some numbers for me, right?
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, if possible, you don't always know, right? If it's an inheritance or something like that, obviously you might not have any warning, but certainly with an IPO, the sooner you can get started in that, the better. And if somebody contacted me a week before an IPO, I would say, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I mean, that would, realistically, that would be the right answer. But if somebody comes to you, 3 months before an IPO, and maybe you haven't, you're already working with them, or maybe the IPO happens sooner than they thought or something like that. I mean, I think that's still pretty reasonable to be able to help somebody through that process. But yeah, if somebody calls and says, IPO is happening very, very soon, it's like, it's too late really to kind of come in and be able to do any meaningful work with them in such a short time.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So it is like having to be, I guess, to borrow the software development term or the software, project management term of being agile. It's just like, okay, this is the immediate need. Let's figure this out, and then we can get to the stuff that we'll be talking through more here. Right. So yeah.
Well, I was just going to add.
Yeah. Go ahead.
With something like an inheritance, you don't necessarily have warning on that. But that, even though it's a significant change, isn't urgent in the sense of like, oh, I have to do something with this $500,000 tomorrow. That is definitely we can think about this for a couple of months, So I think there are situations where people feel like they have to do something quickly. And oftentimes it is better to kind of, process that, take the time to think about what is really important to you, versus just kind of going like, well, I have to do something because I have this huge amount of money that just came in.
Right. Yeah. Just more generally speaking, I can't remember where I heard it, but there's a saying that's like, when life happens, money moves. So it's that it's just like there's these different things, these big life events that happen. Whether you move houses, you change jobs, a death, a birth, all these things or IPO, all this stuff is like, these are big life events, and yes, money, like, most of them have financial ties to them, but especially with things like an inheritance and stuff like that, where I think as much as anything, what is the most valuable thing that we can do as a planner is to give permission to say, hey, you don't have to do anything right now. It's like, you might not be optimizing all of this, inheritance money, life insurance money, whatever, right? But there's to what we're talking about here, it's like, there's the life part of this. Like, there's been a big life change, and you might feel this urge of like, I got to do this, and this, and I got to check all these boxes. but it's like, maybe just take some time to settle into what this new situation is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
I love that.
yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, so yeah. Well, then let's get a little bit into what the life planning process is. So I don't know. You mentioned that there's a 2-day. I think that's kind of a little bit more of a an intro. Actually, well, maybe I should back up. So full disclosure, I have not gone through this process. I am not a registered life planner. But if there's any clients of mine that are watching this, then these 3 questions will be very familiar to you guys. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit up front that I'm a poser in this realm right now. So yeah, I guess if you just want to kind of talk through, whether it's start with a 2-day or with a 5-day Evoke process, kind of what it is. Right?
Yeah, I think the Evoke process is the most applicable in terms of, from the client perspective.
Yeah.
So the Evoke process was developed by George Kinder. You talked about that already. And the training is to, for the planner to be able to implement that process. But the questions, anybody can use the questions. So there's nothing wrong with using those questions regardless. But the Evoke process, what that stands for, the EVOKE, they each stand for something. So the first E is exploration, V is for vision, O is for obstacles, and then knowledge and execution, the last 2 letters, that's pretty much normal financial planning. So the E, V, and O part of Evoke are kind of, putting those conversations first. But once you get to knowledge and execution, there actually isn't really any training there. That's just sort of understood that that's what we are doing with our clients. Mm-hmm. The exploration, vision, and obstacles, that's really what the training focuses on, is understanding what those things are, how to introduce them to clients, what the objectives are, kind of how that works. So an exploration is when you would introduce those 3 questions that you talked about. Do you want me to say what the questions are?
Yeah, sure.
So the first question is, you have all the money in the world, all of your needs are taken care of. What would you do with your time? In the second question, you no longer have unlimited resources. You're just, you're kind of your current situation, but you find out that you have a very finite amount of time left. Let's say 5 years. Right. You feel fine, your health is good, but you know that it's limited. So what would you change about your current life? And then the third question is, you go to your doctor and they say, well, time's up, you got 24 hours left. It's not about what you would do with your last day. It's more about what you didn't get to do, what dreams or anything that was unfulfilled.
Right.
So basically, once you have gone through these questions with clients or gone through it yourself, you'll realize that the questions are a funnel. And so it's when you get to question 3, typically, that you get a lot of really powerful kind of answers. And that's, I think, kind of the heart of what we're doing, is finding out what that answer is to question 3. Right. So that's in the exploration process, those 3 questions. And there's more to it than that, just sort of, having a more open-ended conversation with clients about what's important to them. And again, there's all sorts of techniques about, like, how do you do this with a couple? How do you do it with a single person? So there's some of that too. Because what I think most of us that work with couples know, that there's often one person that's more dominant. Right. So really making sure that both people have a chance to share. So that's the exploration process. Then you move to vision. And so vision is where you do something called lighting a torch. And you essentially, what you're doing as a planner is you're taking this nugget that you get from the client in their question 3. It's usually in question 3. And you're creating a vision for them, and you're lighting a torch. So you usually, paint a picture some point in the future, say a year or 2 from now, where they've basically realized this version of whatever it was that they haven't yet done. So, and you have to do that again. If there's 2 clients, you do it for both of them. And they can be very different, right? It doesn't, when you're working with a couple, it doesn't mean they have to have the same vision or the same torch. In fact, they almost never do. So the vision part of that process is sort of lighting this torch. And then when you get to obstacles, You are basically saying to the client, okay, now we know what we're working towards. This vision is basically what we're working towards. Knowing how important that is to you, what could possibly get in your way. So you allow rather than sitting across from them, again, this is really hard to do as financial planners because we're trained to say, you have a problem, here's the solution. And we kind of like present it to them, do these things and your problem will be solved. But in this case, you're basically letting the client lead. So you say, okay, we know what the vision is. You tell me what could possibly get in the way. So they might list, oh, well, I don't have enough time, whatever their vision was. I don't have the time, or I don't have the money, or, I don't know, whatever those obstacles might be. And so then you say to them, okay, and how are you going to deal with that? Can you think of any ways that you can overcome that? And then who's going to hold you accountable to that? So you really let them lead that part of the process, which I think is super powerful because, again, we're trained to come in and sort of like solve the problem for our clients. And when they do it themselves, they're much more engaged in that, in that process. So that's, again, sort of abbreviated version of how E, V, and O work. And then from there, you start to say, okay, now we know what we're working towards. You know what the obstacles are, which might not be financial. They could be, but they might not. And then you start to pull in the traditional financial planning components, and now you know very clearly what you're working towards. Right.
Yeah. That was way better than I could have described it. So I appreciate that. So I guess starting with the E part, the exploration part. Yeah. So, and kind of with the questions. And I think one of the things that you said that's really important is that, that it's for each person. And how there's always the dynamic of one talks more. I don't know if dominant's the right word, but basically one generally drives the conversations more, right? And so to get it to where there's a lot more equal footing for both parties, for both people in a couple. I think that's definitely a huge one, and frankly, there's times where I struggle with it, where it's like I'm trying to steer it one way, but it's like, hey, let's keep this equal and level, right? So that's one thing that kind of jumped out for me. I don't know, like, do you feel like after going through the process, you feel that it's like, okay, I get a lot better kind of equal participation and buy-in from a couple?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's always a work in progress, and every couple is different. So sometimes it's, even though there might be one that's really dominant, it's pretty easy to sort of, shift the focus. And other times it's really, you're really having to sort of fight against that all the time. But I think, one way, and this could be for anybody in financial planning, regardless of whether or not you're using the, this process. But, when you're talking to a couple, they come to you, and one of them is probably going to do most of the talking. They're going to be like, all right, this is why I'm here. Or maybe you say to them, why are you here? And like one of them immediately jumps in with like, well, A, B, C, D, E. But when you get to the part of the process where you're sort of asking questions, you can, I think a great first question is to say, if you don't already know, which of you is the most likely to, be, I don't know, again, I don't want to use the word dominant, but which one of you is most likely to lead in this conversation? And then say, okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'd like to pivot to the other partner first. I'd like to hear from the other person, the person that's more passive or less likely to immediately jump in with responses. And so by starting with that person, you allow them to sort of set the tone a little bit more. And sometimes then you actively might have to shut the other person down. You might have to say, well, like let this person finish, because a lot of times that more dominant person might start to talk over them or interrupt. And so, it is kind of a careful balance sometimes. Other times it's very easy, and the first person just says, yeah, go ahead, take it away. And they're happy to sort of cede control. But I think there's definitely some skills to be learned about how to allow that person who's less likely to participate to really give them the chance and the freedom to fully step in and kind of and share what is important to them, because they might
Right.
be much less likely to do that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's another interesting in doing in practice and some of the experience that sometimes these conversations do lead to the couple the one looking to the other. It's like, I had no idea that this was a thing for you, and that just so it's strange how the communication can just be opened up just by being this like a listening third party. And I guess maybe I should stress the listening part of it, because I think that's a big piece of from the training perspective of that. It's very much of like we're providing space for them to
Yeah.
to do their own, I guess, searching realization and everything. And there's no me projecting on the situation or say, oh yeah, it's like, oh, you want to go to France? I went to France one time, doing things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. I love that one. That one's so hard to unlearn, because if you're in some kind of like sales role or any other role where you're trying to establish rapport, that's such a hard thing to unlearn, where you essentially are connecting with your client by saying like, oh, I like the Chicago Bears, or I like barbecue, or and you invalidate all the other things that they just shared with you. So it's super hard to just pause on that and let them just keep talking. Basically, there's a big part of just being quiet.
Yeah. That was a good fake scenario, because no one actually likes the Chicago Bears. So I'm kidding. I'm indifferent about them. I'm sure there's someone on Twitter that's gonna flame me for it. But yeah. So anyway, try to get back onto this. And then I guess maybe just another piece that seems really powerful with this. That it's like you're just helping them. Giving them space, setting the vision, and then letting them talk about like what are these obstacles, and do a lot of the making the decisions of what to do. And so it's kind of that empowerment mindset where it's like, hey, I'm not the hero or the soothsayer that says, hey, you come to me, I give you answers, and you go do, right? That it's just like, hey, this is for you. This is empowering you to do it, and so I'm just here to try to facilitate that as best as I can, right?
Yeah, that's such a great part of the process, because I don't think it would be anywhere near as powerful if you did the exploration and the vision, and then you told somebody, well, these are all the things that you need to do to accomplish that.
Right.
The very process of them establishing those next steps and the obstacles and how they're going to overcome them is so much more impactful and empowering.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, actually, if and you can share as much as you feel comfortable with, but you said that you went through the process yourself, right? That's part of the training, is that you go through the life planning process yourself.
Yep.
So if you don't mind, kind of give a version of like how was that process for you?
It was intense, to be perfectly honest, and emotional. So for me, when I did the 3 questions, I had to answer question 1, question 2, and those were very relatively superficial. Like, oh, I would spend more time outside, and I would spend more time with my kids, and more time with my family, and things like that. And when I got to question 3, it was super emotional. So I definitely was doing quite a lot of crying, not in a bad way, but just in a like, oh, okay, I didn't realize how important this is to me. And so basically my answer to question 3 was, I'm not done. I'm not done becoming, like, whatever it is that I'm becoming. And for me, I think so much of that is wrapped up in, what I'm doing professionally, because I've launched a business in the last year, and I'm, working with clients, and I'm delivering this service that I feel very passionately about. And so just the sense that like, I want to kind of see this through.
Yeah.
really what that meant to me. And so, yeah, it was very, very intense. And I'm still kind of working out. Like, I mean, I went through the process in November of last year. So
Okay. Yeah.
9 months or so. I mean, what I'm building in terms of my firm and all of that is still very much a work in progress. So I don't know exactly what that will look like in practical terms, like how big my firm will be, or how many locations we'll have, or which clients we'll serve. Like that part of it is still, a work in progress, I guess. But the intention of, building my own firm, working with clients in the way that I want to work with them, delivering that to more people, those sorts of things are what really came out of question 3 for me. It was like, this is what I'm here to do, and I'm not done doing.
Right. Yeah. That's super powerful. Saying just that statement of just like, I'm not done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like that kind of hit me. It kind of hit me there.
Like I said, it was very powerful for me to kind of just come to that realization. And like I said, it was emotional as well. But I think oftentimes it is for clients. That's kind of the point, is like, until you actually go through it. I mean, I can say these questions to you and you can kind of be like, oh yeah, that's kind of interesting. But until you actually do it, you don't really know what your answers are going to be. And they might surprise you as well. As you said, they might surprise your spouse, which happens a lot. But they might surprise you. So that's really the value, I think, in this process, is sort of like, okay, you're really getting to, I think of it as the nugget, but sort of the heart of the matter.
Yeah. So actually, just out of curiosity, so whenever you're saying, you did the first couple questions and then there was the third one that really got you. So was that more whenever you were answering it and writing it yourself, or was it more in the process of like discussing it and talking through it with the other planner?
With the other planner, yeah. It was, for me, it was more in the answering of the question, which I did privately. So I wasn't answering that with my partner, whose name is Brian. Hi, Brian, if you're watching. So I didn't. There was some emotion for sure in that interaction, but for me, the really powerful part was just, I was just writing on a notepad by myself my answer to question 3, and I was like, holy cow, like, it like I said, powerful. So to me, that was the more resonant part of the process than the actual engaging. But also, to be fair, we were partnered up with another planner that was going through the training. So it was like their very first experience with it too, which I wonder if my experience would have been very different working with somebody who was, say, a seasoned life planner that had been doing this for years. As opposed to somebody that was brand new at it.
Right. Yeah. No disrespect to Brian. Actually, I just chatted with him right before this. He's going to watch the recording. So
I talked to him this morning.
That's really cool. And it does feel like that another thing that makes it somewhat powerful. Yes. Well, I guess to what you were saying, writing it out, it's kind of like with journaling or something like that, or writing out goals. There's something else that happens mentally whenever you actually write something out, right? Whenever you put it down and it becomes more concrete, right?
And one more part of that, again, with working with a couple, is when you give them the questions, it's really important to say to them, don't talk about, don't go home and say, oh, what did you think about that exercise? Like, answer the questions alone, on your own, don't discuss it, and then we'll come together and talk about the results. But if they go home and they, start riffing off of it, it's just going to impact how each of them actually answers the question.
Right. Yeah. Kind of getting back to that kind of empowerment of just like, hey, this is personal to you right now. Right? And then I think there's also, I've found that sometimes it's also powerful for the clients to hear their words, hear them read back to them, right? So it's one thing, again, it makes it concrete that way, but then it makes it even more concrete audibly hearing their words back to them, right? And just seeing some of the, just some of the impact with that.
And the impact on their partner if they're in a couple. So that can be really interesting too. So I often ask, after reading somebody's question back to them, I might say like, how did that feel to sort of hear your answer read back to you? And then I might say to the partner, and, do you have any insights or what did it feel like for you to hear this for the first time?
This is why we do. This is why we wanted to do this, because it's like this is so much more than the whole financial planning process. It's like it's not about what I say to clients and prospects a lot. It's just like none of this stuff is about money, right? Like it's so much deeper than that, and this is just a way to try to get to that and try to uncover that.
And the money, again, I think I said this already, but the money is there to support whatever it is. And the money is important, but it's less important than, these other things that you really value. It's just there to make sure that you have the resources to sort of execute on that.
Right. Yeah. So actually one last question with specific to your experience where, so you felt like you went through it and you felt that you were talking about kind of you have the intention now of what, I guess, how do I say it? Being on the other side of it, how has your like decision making or kind of experience and just the direction that you're going, how do you feel like that's changed?
I don't know if I have a great answer to that, to be honest. I mean, it definitely has shaped some of the decisions that I've made as a business owner, and sort of some of these inflection points of like, okay, do I, hire somebody or do I stop once I get to my own capacity or, so it definitely influences those things. Another thing I would say though, is that, going through the 3 questions, like I said, was very powerful, but I've subsequently done it again, right? Just on my own, just answering 3 questions because it changes, like my answers 6 months ago are different than what they'll be today. And so I have actually my current version, just sort of a short form, written on a Post-it note on my desk. And so I kind of, can refer to that regularly as I'm going through my day. But I do think it really has helped me be crystal clear in terms of what I'm doing with my firm, but, just my life in general too. It's like, okay, is this serving the purpose that I'm working towards?
Right. Yeah, that's huge. So then I guess as far as so maybe to that end, transitioning to we'll transition out of just your I'll stop digging into your own personal experience. Although I do feel like the first having that firsthand experience and what you were just saying, where it's like once you go through it, then you understand it in a different way, right? So, so yeah, I guess George Kinder, if you're watching, then you'll probably see me in the training here pretty soon. But then translating it into like working with other clients in planning practice, right? I guess just thinking of once you have that clarity, then a lot of the issues or problems that people come with and say like, I don't know if I should, if I should, sell all my stock here, or if I want, or like if we should move, or we're renting and should we buy a house and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I feel like doing this helps. It gives you a I don't know, a North Star or something that's like, this is how I'm oriented, and so like it can clarify all of these other questions that you have.
Yeah, exactly. It frames every subsequent decision that you're making, for sure. And I do think, specifically with working with the type of clients that you and I work with, one of the nice things about this process is there are a lot of opportunities to reevaluate, right? Whether it's an IPO, an IPO can be life-changing. It might not be, but it could be. You might have some massive change to your net worth and your life situation. And so having these kinds of conversations ahead of time it really does help once that sort of thing comes up. But in tech, it's just so much more common. Like,
Right.
even without an IPO, the salaries are higher, the comp is better. So there's more possibilities in terms of
Right.
what is realistic because you have a lot of resources.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah. And for me personally, here I'll turn it on myself a little bit, give you a break. So it's my background is like I was in tech, right? And I was in software development and architecture and all that stuff for a good while. And I obviously didn't go through this exact process, but as far as making such a life change to walk away from that career to doing what I'm doing now, where it's financial planning and working with other people and having these kinds of conversations. I definitely in my tech career, I definitely was not having these types of conversations with anybody, right? It's just like you go, you do your work, and then it's very surface level, and then you come home. And my wife asked me what happened, and it's just like I don't know. It was boring. No. But yeah, just kind of thinking that just having that clarity to inform some pretty big decisions that you're going to make, right? So yeah, maybe I should have gone through it earlier, but I feel like I'm oriented in the right spot, in the right direction here.
Well, it's interesting because you and I are both career changers. So we both came to
Yeah.
financial planning, sort of later in our careers, and have come up against this process after we've already become
Right.
financial planners. Like, I wonder, what it would have been like to go through this 10 years ago before I started this process. Would I have still ended up as a financial planner, or would I have done something different? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, cool. So I guess any other. I know we had talked a little bit before this about other kinds of questions that you ask, and yeah. So I guess, are there any other questions? These three questions are super powerful, but are there any other like favorites of yours or anything that it's like, whether it's in the prospecting process or with clients that you talk through?
I don't do a lot in the prospecting process. I really um, don't have a long prospecting process, so there's not really a lot of time to do this kind of stuff. But I'm still experimenting with some of these questions, so I try new things out all the time. So if anybody has any favorite questions, I would love to hear them. But one that I've been using lately that I've been really enjoying is to ask my clients what their first memory of money is, or their first impression. Because sometimes people will say, like, well, I don't have a specific memory, but the first time I was aware of money or something. And that has brought up some really interesting conversations. So that's my current favorite one.
Yep. I think it's good to like inform the any subsequent conversations of just making sure that, like, understanding where someone came from and the kind of the history, and what money means to them, to that really shapes and informs their decisions going forward. Because from your perspective, it just might be like, either you're taking way more risk than I feel like you should, or you're just like putting everything in cash and you're the most conservative, like way more conservative than I feel like you should be, or what the textbook says you should, right? So yeah, I can see how that kind of question would uncover that, and help unpack and really understand kind of where they're coming from.
Yeah, it really does. And what I've found is once people start to talk about that first money memory or experience or whatever, they oftentimes in the meeting will say, like, oh, I can see how I still, how this has impacted my relationship with money today. Like, I've seen that light bulb go off for people in the, as they're answering that question, because they can really recognize how that informs their relationship with money today. And it's like, I'm not necessarily here to change that or fix that or anything like that, but it's still very helpful to know.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Very cool. Let's see. I guess before we move on, is there anything else that around the Kinder process, or anything else with the questions or life planning that you were wanting to talk through?
I think the only other thing I would add is, and we talked about a little bit about giving people space and listening, but if you do nothing else, I mean, if you never use the Kinder process or the 3 questions or any of those things, I think just giving people a little bit more space and listening, because,
Right.
I can't tell how many prospects and clients I've met with who either had an advisor or met with somebody else who didn't listen to them. And it's really unfortunate when somebody
Right.
goes through that experience where like the planner just kind of goes in and starts to do their thing and they really haven't listened. So I'd say if you do nothing else from this conversation and this information that that Mike and I have shared, just listening and giving clients an opportunity to really share what's important. Even just in a very, very small way, it's better than what the 80% of financial planners out there are doing right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, with that, but actually, even to me, even just carrying that outside of the financial planning world and just general conversation, right, of how much we, you know, this is me. In my head, I'm thinking of like, what kind of cool response am I going to have, or like, how can I, say something, impactful or funny or whatever, and that one, I've started to try to be a lot more conscious of just like,
Mhm.
not doing that. Oh, hey, you like this? I like this too, and just being really open-ended and just listening, right, and let the other person, speak.
It is pretty fascinating when you start to do this in the rest of your life, and you really just let people talk. Most people actually will just talk given the opportunity.
Right.
And yeah, and I think, again, most people will do a lot more talking if you let them, and they'll usually be really happy with how that conversation went. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah, Danika, really, I really like it. Yeah,
Right.
let me talk and talk. I mean, people want to be listened to. They want to be heard.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's pretty fun to kind of take some of this out into the real world.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. But definitely in the financial situation, especially for the one that doesn't feel very empowered, that having a financial professional just like sit and listen and basically follow, let them lead and follow, and then the planner being the one to follow. That, like,
Right.
it's because really what. Cause, I mean, your tagline is, financial empowerment for all women. So it's like that empowerment part of it
Mhm.
is huge, and this is just one really effective way of realizing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sets the tone for sure for the whole relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, man, it's heavy. I think that's where I'll have to see if I can segue from there to Reddit, but
Bit of a
so,
disconnect.
so yeah, yeah. Usually, so just ending the conversation, trying to talk about address a question that I pull off of Reddit. So Reddit, there's tons of people that really there's a lot of people that try to get financial help and guidance through social media, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we won't go into all the details of that. But I like to try to pick out a question that's somewhat relevant to what we're talking about and give our spin on it. Not necessarily, again, going back to the disclaimer, this is not specific advice
Mm-hmm.
to this. It's a throwaway idea anyway. Um, so yeah, just going through this question a little bit. I won't go through all of the details of it, but it's a lot of what we're talking about where they're at a company and they're getting ready to IPO, and so there's a possible windfall, and and this says, for this purpose, let's say it ends up with $3 million, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a little bit of background of they're married, late 20s, don't have any kids. And so then questions are basically what to do. And, like, and I know that's a very huge question, and that's why there's a lot of paragraphs to this. But,
Mm-hmm.
talking about paying off loans and should I buy a house? And I think one thing that is kind of telling here is, like do you just buy a house outright? So there's that feeling of just am I supposed to do this? Is this a wise thing to do? Um,
Mhm.
so so yeah, I mean, I guess maybe without steering it one way or another, kind of what would be your general take on this type? If a client came to you and said, "Hey, this is what I have going on."
Mhm. Well, without going through the full, Evoke process or the full life planning process, I mean, just even having a conversation with this person, I would definitely be taking a step back first. So finding out what is important to you, and if there are some things that that this person really wants to do that now they'll be able to because they can afford it. So whether it's something like, oh, I've always wanted to write a book, that could be really powerful here because, okay, well, now you have the money to take a year off and write a book, right? So if it's something like that, knowing those sorts of priorities or whatever values for a particular client would be a really helpful thing to know upfront. And so I would definitely be doing that sort of thing before talking about buying a house in cash or getting a mortgage. Like that's important, but that's a later on question, and it's also very, very specific, right? So
Right.
again, before we even have that conversation, I might say, well, tell me why buying that house is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So they might say, oh, well, I thought with more money I should get a bigger house. It's like, okay, well, I would want to know exactly what are they trying to accomplish with this new house purchase? Okay, that would be the first question.
Right.
And once we decide on the price range and what the real priority is in terms of buying a new house, like, is it space? Is it a bigger yard? Is it proximity to family? And so then once you establish those things, then you can start to talk about, okay, well, practically, what is the best way to do that? Like, should you finance it? Should you pay cash?
Right.
Um,
Right.
And then within that, there's so many different, I'd say like personality types around debt versus, and this sort of comes back to risk and all those sorts of things. So I might say something like, well, on paper, it makes more sense for you to get a mortgage and interest rates are low, you invest the extra cash and that will perform better over the long run. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right decision for this person, right? This person hate having debt, they might have some trauma around it or some other, just challenge that means for them, maybe it does make sense to pay cash. So, I mean, I think there's layers. So to begin, I would definitely be taking a big picture look at their whole situation, their life.
Right.
Maybe go through some of these questions if possible. And then start to drill down into the different components of, okay, buying a house, setting up an emergency reserve, paying off debt, like all these different individual problems within the bigger issue.
Right. Yeah. So it's I guess taking it back to the Evoke process, then a lot of this is trying to skip to the K, to the knowledge part of just like, okay, yeah, what's the practical step that I need to take next? And I know in the tech world especially that people are very analytical and that they just want, like, I just need this concrete answer. And maybe they're not wanting to go through all of or it's like, I've already gone through all these steps or blah blah blah, right? But I'd be willing to bet that people haven't done this for themselves to the extent that what we've just talked about. But yeah, and then yeah, with what you were saying, where backing up of just like why, asking that why, like why do you actually want to buy a house, right? And does it come from, well, that's what I'm supposed to do, or yeah, I have this money and so yeah, that's the general wisdom. So, and then also the yeah, whether to use debt to carry the debt, or if you just want to pay it off. That actually, to me, goes back to your other question of what's your first money memory, and kind of because again, it might have been something where it's like, my parents went bankrupt, and we got evicted from our house, right? Or I got foreclosed on or something. So yeah, I mean that's definitely that. There's definitely a lot behind a lot of these questions, right?
I heard a quote. I've heard this before, but I heard it again this morning, and I just love it so much. but it's something like you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. And to me, that just means like you're in the jar, you're in your life, and there's all this stuff going on, and you can't read the label, you can't see it because it's so part of your everyday experience. And so as the financial planner, you can read the label, right? You can step back and say, all right, this is what we're looking at. This is the landscape. But when you're kind of, especially something like an IPO that can be life-changing and, all consuming and all this other stuff, it's so hard to get perspective.
Right. Yeah, that's great. I can't say I've ever heard that, and that's a good one for sure. Yeah, but and yeah, just kind of the entire the entire process and the slowing down. It's as much just slowing down, right? Where people come, they're looking for answers, just like, okay, let's slow down. And even if you do go through some of this process and your answer is the same, then it makes it more affirming, I think, of like, I can do this with full confidence right now, right? So yeah, that's great. So I guess wrapping up, I told you this stuff flies by. So we're at an hour right now. So yeah, just in closing, where can people find you?
So I am on all the social media platforms, mostly Twitter. So I'm Danika W on Twitter. My website is zinafp.com, Zina Financial Planning. I'm on LinkedIn, Danika Waddell, all of the other things.
Right. Okay. All right. Great. Well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. You described everything about life planning 20 times better than I could have myself. So.
I'm still learning. I'm not an expert, but I'm definitely getting better.
Yeah. Well, that's part of all of this, is like we're all learning and growing. We're not done, right?
Definitely not done.
Right. Okay. Well, hey, I appreciate it. And yeah, I guess we'll talk in our study group here in a little bit. And for everybody else, I appreciate you joining in, and talk to everyone else in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks.
Thanks.